Well, thanks for coming on to the podcast, mate.
Thank you. Is it started? Am I in it? Is this happening?
You're in it. This is it. We've gone. We're off.
Oh my God. Okay, right.
The horse has bolted, mate.
Oh God.
You're 2 furlongs behind everyone else.
Kieran, shut up. No, we're not live. We are recording, but we haven't started. Well, I don't know. I might pull some of that. It's interview gold, that stuff.
Feel free.
This is Sheer Isolation. It's presented by Kieran Moore in Trowbridge and John Ponting in Cricklade.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is Sheer Isolation. I am John in Cricklade and Kieran is in Trowbridge.
As ever, John. Hello, how are you?
Hello, cracking. The sun is shining. It feels like winter might just be over.
You know, you do that thing where you've been outside and you go into a house. Now, the house may have all its lights on and be completely fine, but when you've been outside and it's so bright, you go in, it automatically goes really dark and you can't see anything. I've just had that moment.
Is that because you got transitions in your glasses?
No, it's unrelated to my glasses. I was driving home, all fine and dandy, open my front door, walk in my front door, and I've got like an alleyway, like a porch or whatever, you know what's it called, I don't know, a corridor.
Hallway.
It's just dark, hallway, I just can't see anything. Ugh.
See, I always trip up this time of year because I do have transitions in one of my pairs of glasses. And over winter, obviously, it doesn't matter which ones I wear. And then I'll go out on a day like this. And then all of a sudden, it's like, I'm wearing sunglasses. I don't remember doing that. Anyway.
There you go.
That's our health section sorted. So the purpose of this show, Sheer Isolation, is to promote and highlight music and art scene across the west of England. And we do that by playing a couple of tunes and getting a guest on to have a chat. We have got a very special guest. One of our more famous guests, I think, Kieran, in the history of our show, Professor Elemental, is joining us.
He is. He's a long-term friend of mine. I promoted him an awful lot, and he has a new album out, and he's got festival season coming up, and he's touring. And I thought, what better? He's such a erudite kind of guy. He's got really great way of talking. He's just really, really insightful and interesting. And I thought, what a great guest. We'll ask him to come on, and he agreed. Literally, a drop of a hat.
He must be having a quiet week then. For people who aren't too familiar with him, he Steampunk chap-hop is the music that he creates. Basically, has the character of an old English gent, Victorian, but rapping.
He raps in the Queen's English as well, so he really pronounces his words, etc. So it's all very sort of clear and pristine. So yeah, it's not like dropping all his T's and H's and all the rest of it, and you can't understand them or whatever. It's very, very, what's the word? Whimsical. It's great.
And there's less than a handful of people who do that across the UK. So
yeah.
So it is strange, but at the same time, he's a very unique individual character.
He is, very much so, and one I've got a lot of time for. Right,
we need to play a tune. What are we going to play?
So I'm going to surprise you with a tune by a band called Tankus The Henge, and this is a track called Luna Park. They have just been confirmed as a headliner at Devizes Festival in Devizes in June. So previous guest Margaret Bryant, who came on to talk about the festival last year, has booked them for the festival this year. So that's exciting for Devizes. And if you don't know Tankus The Henge, they are an absolute festival band. They're like a circus, but live. Everything they do is utterly fantastic and wonderful. They're great performers, and I've got a huge amount of time and love for them. So we picked Luna Park from their new album. This is Tankus The Henge.
Why do I feel so goddamn hollow?
There we go. That's Luna Park, Tankus The Henge. Incredible band. Well, good choice. And I'm surprised you haven't played them previously.
We champion music from the Southwest, and although they're not from the Southwest, they are playing the Southwest, and I thought that qualified. So, I don't know why we haven't, but they're just great, so we have now.
Have you got product placement this week, Kieran?
I do, but I can't find it. Let me go find it.
I mean, it's that time of the show where I try to do ad-lib, but I'm like Garth from Wayne's World, and it really doesn't go well. So I'll just stay quiet and wait for Kieran to come back.
So, John, at the weekend just gone, I hosted a series of gigs, like I do. That's what I do. And we had the wonderful, the beguiling, the sensational, the talented, the effortless Lucy Farrell play for me at the Pump in Trowbridge. And because I work Fridays at the town hall, I don't get to go to my gigs until the end. And I said to Lucy in the sound check, I said, "Oh, can you play this song last? And then I will be back in time and I'll hear it." And so I got to the venue as everyone was clapping to say, "Well done, good night, see you later." And I turn up with my pint and I go, "I'm here now." She goes, "Oh, I've just played the song." I said, "Can you play it again?" And so she did. She played it again just for me. So Lucy, she came back to my house afterwards. She stayed in my gypsy hut at the bottom of the garden with her brother. He was over from France visiting her. Me and her brother cycled back from the pub, and she drove. And they went to my gypsy hut and all the rest of it. And the next day I got up really early and went to work again because we had a repair cafe on. And she left me this present. It's an embossed lino cut, and you can just about make out it's the lyrics to one of her songs, "We Are Only Sound." And for me, that's a real earworm. First time I heard it, I fell in love with it. And I just keep singing the sort of lyrics from the song over and over and over. So she left this for me as a little gift, and it's really, really lovely. I'm going to get it framed and put it on my wall. And her new album is going to be amazing. I can't wait.
Cool. And from what you said there with that story, there was a lot of stuff to unpack there, such as gypsy huts and cycling home from the pub and repair cafes. This is all stuff we will cover in future episodes, I am sure. But we have to move on to our guest for the week. Because we want to give him plenty of time, because it is fascinating to chat to Professor Elemental, not just about music and his career, but also stuff that he did before and stuff he's doing in the future. And we go off onto all kinds of... We start. How do we end up talking about men's mental health? How did that happen?
Beautifully, John. Beautifully. That's how it happened.
It really did, yeah. So just a proper two friends chatting there. Professor and Kieran just having a good old natter about all things musical and taking whatever tangent they felt the need to. If you missed our description in the opening part of the show, Professor Elemental, he's a musician, very much uses the Queen's English very properly, but he is a rapper. He dresses up in proper old-fashioned gear. He's quite popular with the steampunk lot, and he is a self-admitted nerd, which is good. We need more nerds in the spotlight. Kieran, one other obscure reference that you mentioned during the interview, which we didn't really cover, was about Phineas and Ferb and a YouTube video. So do you want to tell us about that now, so that when people listen to the interview, it makes sense?
Yes. So Phineas and Ferb was I think it's Nickelodeon. It started on Nickelodeon, which was a Sky channel. It's just a kid's cartoon, but the two people in it are nerds. So he was approached by them off screen by the company that make the cartoon to create a theme tune for them, and they actually did a whole episode. I think it's called "The Future is Steam Powered." They did a song called "Steam Powered Future," and he does a whole song with the two characters. So it's like a cartoonized version of himself, and it's a classic. So kids' classic. So one day you're listening to him, and then the next minute your kids are watching him on TV, and you're thinking, "This is a bit weird." So there you go.
So there we go. So that explains something we talked about. Let's go over to the interview with Professor Elemental.
So Professor Elemental is a kind of Victorian-flavoured steampunk mad professor. He is a lunatic who lives alone, occasionally with an orangutan butler, conducting terrible experiments that nobody asked for and nobody wants to see. And I make a lot of music based in this character, and fortunately have been lucky enough to travel around the world doing it and lend my voice to cartoons and written comics and novels and all kinds of things. Basically, I've had a single idea and I'm milking it for all it's worth.
I was never going to get such an honest assessment. Well, I have to say, Paul, it's a very enjoyable character. I've loved, working with you over the years. But actually, I wanted to know, I was chatting to John a minute ago, I don't actually know what you did before you were a full-time musician. What's your story? Where do you come from?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, sometimes in sort of World War II dramas, little children will look up at their fathers and say, "What did you do in the war, Daddy?" I've been fired from so many jobs that genuinely, when we used to do the school run, my children, when they were quite young, would be like, "Daddy, tell me some more stories of places you've been fired from." Well, let me tell you about the time I was fired from an ice cream parlor from a simple misunderstanding about too much butterscotch. So yeah, I got fired from everything. There's not many industries that I haven't been fired from. Call centers and factories, and fired from a glove factory, a huge, terrible miscalculation with some industrial gloves. There's a lot of terrible things that happened. I was fired from being Tom from Tom and Jerry on a cross-channel ferry because I got bored and I wheeled a little, I'm not proud, but I wheeled a little old lady into the duty free and piled her up with scotch and then wheeled her out again. But I was a teenager then and I would never do that sort of thing now. So I did lots of terrible stuff. And then I did one job that I liked, only one, which was being a teacher of young people with special educational needs. And I did that for about 6 years. Just a beautiful group of teenagers. And I could have happily done that forever if the professor hadn't stumbled in across my path and taken off in a way that I couldn't have imagined. So I was like, well, it does seem a little bit easier putting on a funny hat and dancing around. Maybe I'll do that for a bit. And here I am.
So obviously one day it just you realized you could actually make a living out of this, and away you went.
Well, it's that weird, who would have imagined you could possibly make a living out of it? And it was the common, as it always is with, things like this. It was a combination of luck that Steampunk came around and I got an American gig, and it was just like, Americans are like, I was chatting to one of them and I was like, I'd love to do this for a living. He was like, "You can do it, man. You can live your life. You can achieve your dreams." Like, oh, maybe I could. Oh, give it a go then. So actually, that kind of very enthusiastic American sort of spurred me on. And as somebody else said to me, and I didn't that really changed my mind. If there's anybody who's got a creative thing and they're not sure whether they want to do it for a living, they were kind of on the cusp. Someone said to me, if it doesn't work out, you can always go back and get another shit job. Like if you're in a miserable job and you're going to try creativity, it's not a one-way street. If it really doesn't work out and it's a disaster, just go back and get the job you hate again. You've lost nothing. So once I'd heard that advice, I was like, yeah, I can do this.
Oh, that's amazing advice. But I was going to say, you did this all without a manager, really, haven't you, to an extent? It's all been pretty much under your own volition.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's definitely times, particularly as you've been doing it over a decade, for all of the lovely sort of buoyant times, there are times like if I stop, it will just all fall in like a house of cards. Like there's only me to keep motivating it and keep pushing it along, which is great in some ways because it kind of provides you with a good bit of motivation. That if you don't do that, then the children will have to live in a shed and eat condiments. But also it can be quite, that can be quite tiring. I got around that though, and I'm sure you guys are kind of similar, is the joy of collaboration. Like, and I do have, I've got a lovely booking agent, Ellie Morgan-Jones, who can kind of help listen to me whinge about things and put things together, and also loads of creative people to work with as well. Tom Caruana makes all the beats and all the lovely musicians I collaborate with, and that keeps you going. I think if you're doing something solo, single-handedly, you have to tap into some other people who are doing the same.
Yeah, that's really, really great advice. So if you've got no formal representation, how do things like Phineas and Ferb come along? How does that manifest? How did that happen? They just drop you a video, like a message on YouTube and say, "Hey man, do you want to make..." How does that work?
Well, that one in particular, I think again, I got quite lucky because it was I went viral in the days where it was possible to do that on YouTube quite randomly. It was before the algorithms kind of pinned everything down. So, it's so very streamlined. You don't really get that sort of coverage that I had. So I think the video circulated much more broadly than I would have imagined. And actually with Phineas and Ferb, this lovely man, Swampy Marsh, phoned up. And he was under the impression that I was quite famous in England, and I did nothing to deter him from that impression. And he kept saying things like, "So, I've been working with Jeremy Clarkson. Do you know Jeremy?" I was like, "Well, we don't know each other per se. I mean, I know of him. We move in similar circles." I'm not quite lying, not quite telling the truth. So just, like we all do, I had to just do a bit of blagging, and it kind of, and And it not only led to that, but now I've made friends with lots of people who work in the cartoon industry, and we're working on lots of lovely little projects as well. Nothing wrong with a bit of blagging to start you off, I say.
No, you've got to work the hustle, mate. You've got to work the hustle.
Got to work the hustle.
So in fact, but it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, doesn't it? Because okay, I assume you haven't hung out with Jeremy Clarkson yet, but fundamentally you kind of got to that point. You got to that level. Yeah,
definitely. And there is something to be said for that. I was writing a talk that I'm doing at a lovely convention this weekend about, which is called Fake It While You Create It, about sort of self-belief and bluffing even when you haven't got it. A bit like the principle that if you're in a bit of a grumpy mood, I'm not talking about a terrible tragedy, but just a general kind of having a rubbish day. If you start pretending you're happy, generally you will eventually become happy. That definitely happens. And I think the same is true. If you can do it without being a dickhead, the same is true about talking yourself up. We don't do that very much in this country. And the first time I went from, oh, I'd love to be a rapper, to actually being a rapper, someone sort of said, oh, you rap, mate? And the first time I ever went, yeah, and is you any good? Yeah, I'm great, actually. And I was awful, obviously. But just that first little bit of bluff was the thing that sort of sent me on the path. And I think we all need a little bit of that sometimes.
So yeah, because you do all the Comic Cons as well, don't you, and all the conventions?
Yeah, and that is one of the absolute nicest bonuses of the whole thing, is because I love hip hop, and I've got some really great friends that are MC, some of my best friends in the whole world that I really admire. But hip hop as a whole culture in Brighton, particularly in my sort of early 20s, I just didn't fit in. It was a very laddie, blokey, alpha male football battling kind of culture, and I just couldn't find I couldn't sort of square that circle. I wanted to talk about Dungeons and Dragons and the latest Batman comic. So suddenly finding a pathway into this wonderful world of nerdery where I could also do music, it was like, oh, this is heaven. I found my tribe. I can make jokes about really obscure superheroes and they're on board. It was lovely.
I'm ish nerdy. I'm about certain things. I'm really nerdy about June. I love June. I'm not nerdy like to the extent that you are about things, but I'm listening to these songs and I'm going, if I'm of that nature and I'm listening to this music, I'd find it really empowering and really, a sense of self and a sense of place. And I think, I don't know, there aren't a huge amount of musicians that do kind of specifically go out of their way to be associated with that scene of people. You must be pretty unique.
Oh, that's a really nice thing to say. Yeah, I think there are a lot of bands increasingly as the world of being a nerd has become more mainstream. There are a lot of bands that sort of tap into it and make a lot of it. But yeah, there is. I enjoy sort of having that communication as most nerds were sort of bullied at one point in their life, or felt a bit downtrodden or a bit of an outcast, and trying to gather up those people and say, no, we are all of those things, but actually that's what kind of makes us brilliant. Is a really nice thing. Like I was watching a really good documentary called Feels Good Man last night, and it's about this little character Pepe the Frog who has been sort of co-opted by the alt-right. And there's quite a lot in it about. I know I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but bear with me. Okay. There's quite a lot in this about these kind of alt-right kids on 4chan in their basement, and how that came to be. How did that become a thing? And it's the same principle as all the people who like steampunk, all the people that see at sci-fi conventions. It's just that same principle turned sour. It's people feeling really outcasted from all the things that they feel like they should achieve. So they kind of band together. And so, I think it becomes all the more important to band together for the forces of good, because there's too many bad guys out there who will happily take advantage of disenfranchised groups.
Yeah, so I mean, in many ways, it's those people that need it the most. We should be reaching out to and trying to look after.
Yeah, I definitely think that, and without getting too deep into it, I definitely think that's the case with men and young men as well. I think in some ways, men should be looking after men better. We should be doing a better job of kind of, raising young men and looking after our mates' mental health and checking in on each other, rather than just, going for banter all the time.
Well, no, you know what? I completely agree. I'll tell you a very short story, but this weekend just gone, I went to a repair cafe that my wife organised in Trowbridge. And this gentleman came along to as a repairer. He's just moved to Trowbridge. He doesn't know anyone. He's got no friends. He wanted to set up a repair cafe, but this one happened to have fallen into his lap. He came in and he had the most incredible day chatting to other men about equipment and technology and fixing stuff. And he fixed a speaker for me, and we had a wonderful time, like jovial, and it was just brilliant. But it was exactly that. It was men being men without being dickheads. There's no, no drink, no sports, no jokes about women. There was no taking the piss out of each other. It was just people being nice. And it was truly something I haven't really experienced before. And it was amazing.
That's beautiful. I think that's part of the key of it as well, because and I'm generalizing hugely here, but as a whole, men, maybe slightly older men in particular, we sort of need something else, don't we? We can't just sit in a room with a cup of tea and, discuss our feelings with ease. We can do it while we're repairing a speaker, or also, sharing our comic book collections, or talking about music or whatever it might be. We almost need a bit of a distraction to get down to brass tacks sometimes.
Okay, tell us more about, Professor, what have you got planned for the rest of the year? Because I know you're going to tour, you've got festival season. Do you have any releases?
Very exciting. And so the last release that's only really just come out was called Nemesis, and it was the biggest project I've ever done. It's got like 20 different people, loads of different musicians on it, and tells a whole story of me losing my orangutan butler. It's a tragic, epic tale. I know. I wanted to make a kind of War of the Worlds style, like big, huge concept album, and I was really chuffed with it. So that's only just come out, really, and I'm working inevitably on 27 different things at once. But the tour is the main thing. I'm looking forward to coming back to Trowbridge. That's going to make me so happy coming back to Trowbridge. Every gig I've done with you, I don't think there's been a duff one, actually. Every single one has been really, really fun. But one of the projects I'm most excited about at the moment is that I'm working with Sophie Scott, who is a renowned neurologist, and she studies laughter and how the brain works. And the two of us are going to work on a live show and an album with a producer friend of mine called Felman, all about a journey inside the brain. We're going to clash mad science and real science and see if we can find something that works in the middle.
That sounds amazing already.
I know, it sounds really good. I'm so excited. But she's so clever. And she's so lovely, she's used to talking to idiots like me, so she's quite good at dumbing it down to a level I can understand. But when you have it, again, it's that bluffing thing. When you're talking to someone who's so clever, and I don't want to try and appear as clever as her, but I just want to try and look like I understand. So she was telling me some quite outlandish things, and I was having to go, yeah, and just writing down, look that up when you get home.
We always ask the guest at the end to pick a song to play us out on. I'm going to put you on the spot and say, pick a track.
Let's finish on Jollity Farm by the Bonzo Dog Doo-Dah Band. Because
okay.
The Professor, that's where he came from. That's where he very first came from, was me and Tom Caruana sitting in a tree late at night after some special magic toast that we'd eaten and listening to Bonzo Dog Doo-Dah Band and starting to talk like he does in this song. So I think it's nice to end on my roots.
There's a farm called Misery, but of that we'll have none, because we know of one that's always lots of fun. And this one's name is Jollity. Believe me, folks, it's great, for everything sings out to us as we go through the gate. All the little pigs, they grunt and howl, the cats meow, the dogs bow wow, everybody makes a row down on Jollity Farm. All the little pigs, they grunt and howl.
Grunt, howl, grunt, howl.
The cats meow.
Meow, meow.
The dogs bow wow.
Ruff, 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 ruff.
Everybody makes a row down on Jollity Farm. All the little birds go tweet, tweet, tweet. The lambs all bleat and shake their feet. Everything's a perfect treat down on Jollity Farm. Regular as habit, the cocks begin to crow, and the old buck rabbit sings "Stop it up a jumper, vo-do-de-o." All the little ducks go quack, quack, quack. The cows all moo, the bull does too. Everyone says how do you do down on Jollity Farm.
Jollity Farm, the Bonzo Dog Doo-Dah Band. And we're going straight into that to some to news.
So, John, I've got some very sad news to share with the West
ahead.
Country today. Promoter and all-round musical good egg, Rob Talbot, who many people will know from the Glastonbury scene. He passed away yesterday, so Monday 21st. A lot of people knew of his health issues. He required a new heart. He had various medical issues. He was in and out of hospital. I know he was up in Birmingham for a while in hospital. He was on the transplant list to receive a new heart. And he had been told a while back that it had been postponed, etc., etc. And he knew he was playing a waiting game to see what happened first. And sadly for the whole of the music scene in the Southwest, unfortunately, he passed away through his illness. I've had a lot of friends comment on my post. I put up a very brief post about him. I met him at a friend's house, like a house party gig. I knew about him already. We were already friends on social media, but I hadn't met him. And a friend of mine contacted me to say, only reason I know about you, Kieran, is because Rob told me to contact you. And since then, her husband's band has played for me a few times, etc. And he's just one of those facilitators, people that made things happen in much the same way that I like to think that I do. But he was just based a little bit further down the road in Glastonbury. We did very similar shows, very similar artists, people like the Levelers and your Gaz Brookfields and people like that. And he was just a fantastic guy. And he will be sorely, sorely missed, particularly in the Glastonbury area, but the whole scene in general.
Okay, thank you for that, Kieran. Yeah, so that's Rob Talbot, who passed away in the last week. Kieran, that was a very lovely obituary, off the top of your head as well. So that's that just shows,
I didn't plan any of that.
That just shows your true heart was in that. So thank you. We will move on just to run through a couple of gigs, I guess, unless you have any further news you want to talk about.
No, other than we've covered all the news I could possibly wish to cover. So over to you.
Okay, so I've just picked out a few gigs that are coming up in the coming weeks across the region. At Cheltenham Racecourse on the 8th of April, you've got Paul Weller. So, a man that needs no introduction there. So I'm sure there's plenty of people who'll be wanting to see him. So check out Cheltenham Racecourse if they've got any tickets left. On the 5th of April, Goldfrapp. How would you describe them? Kind of electronic pop, I guess, is a good way of saying it.
Electropop.
Yeah, but they're going to be at the Bath Forum on the 5th. And then going back to my favourite living room in Swindon at the Tuppenny on the 3rd of April, the folk duo Fly Yeti Fly. They're worth checking out as well.
Excellent. Yes, I know Ed loves the Yetis. The Yetis have actually sold out the Trowbridge Pump. They're actually due to play the Pump. It's going to be rammed. So if you get the chance to see them in Swindon, because you won't get to see them in Trowbridge, do go along. They are wonderful.
We should wrap up because the Zoom's going to chuck us out in a second. So if anyone wants to get in touch with us, sheerisolation@gmail.com, or you can check out our website, sheerisolation.co.uk, where you can find previous shows, or you can go onto Spotify and Amazon and Apple and all the other streaming services. That is it from us. We'll be back at the same time next week. Thank you for listening. Kieran, thank you for joining me. It's been a lovely show with some amazing content as always. Thank you for your time. Thanks for listening.
Take care.
Cheers. All right. Bye now. Bye.